request video, so any topics you're interested in seeing me tackle on this channel, please leave your suggestions in the comments below, and I look forward to reading them. Thank you. Understanding logical fallacies is essential for anyone who wishes to engage in rational discourse, make informed decisions, or develop sound arguments. This knowledge is not only valuable in academic settings, but also in our personal and professional lives. Clear and logical thinking can greatly enhance our communication and problem-solving skills. So, what are logical fallacies? Well, to begin, logical fallacies are the number one reason I cannot stand politics. Logical fallacies are errors in reasoning that undermine the logic of an argument. They can be incredibly deceptive, but often appear convincing at first glance, which is why they are frequently used in debates, politics, advertising, and everyday conversations. Recognizing these fallacies is the first step toward avoiding them and promoting clearer, more rational discourse. Logical fallacies can be categorized in various ways, but today I'm going to focus on several common types, provide definitions and examples to illustrate each one, and offer some strategies for avoiding these fallacies in your own arguments. So, why are logical fallacies used? Well, there are several reasons. Fallacies can be persuasive, even if they're logically flawed. People may use them intentionally to convince others of their own point of view. Sometimes individuals use fallacies unknowingly because they're unaware of the errors in their reasoning. Fallacies can also divert attention from weak points in an argument or from issues the speaker prefers to avoid. Also, complex issues are often simplified using fallacies, making them easier to understand or more appealing to a broader audience. So, now I want to get into some of the common logical fallacies. The first is known as the slippery slope. The slippery slope fallacy occurs when a relatively small first step is assumed to lead to a chain of related events culminating in some significant impact, usually negative. This fallacy exaggerates the consequences of an action without sufficient evidence. For example, if we allow students to redo their assignments, soon they'll expect to redo every test, and eventually they won't take any responsibility for their education. To avoid this fallacy, provide concrete evidence for each step in the chain of events. Ensure that the connection between each step is logical and supported by facts. The second fallacy is hasty generalization. A hasty generalization is made when a conclusion is drawn from a sample that's too small or not representative. For example, my neighbors have noisy dogs, so all dogs in my neighborhood must be noisy. To avoid this, again, gather sufficient evidence. Gather that representative data before drawing conclusions. Be wary of making broad statements based on limited evidence. The third fallacy is post hoc ergo propter hoc. This Latin phrase translates to after this, therefore because of this. It's a fallacy that assumes that if one event occurs after another, then the first event must have caused the second. For example, I wore my lucky socks and won the game, therefore my lucky socks caused the victory. To avoid this fallacy, look for evidence of a causal relationship fallacy involves judging something as good or bad based solely on where it comes from or its origins. For example, we shouldn't trust this study because it was funded by a corporation. To avoid this, evaluate the merit of an argument or evidence based on its own merits rather than its origin. Focus on the content, not the source. Fifth, we have begging the claim. Begging the claim is a fallacy where the conclusion that one's trying to prove is included in the initial premise of the argument. For example, filthy and polluting coal should be banned. To avoid this, ensure that your premises provide independent support for your conclusion. Avoid assuming the truth of the conclusion within the argument, no matter how convinced you are. Sixth, we have the circular argument. A circular argument is one where the conclusion is included in the premise, essentially arguing in a circle. For example, the Bible is true because it says so in the Bible. To avoid this, provide separate and distinct evidence to support your claims. Each statement should be justified by evidence outside of the conclusion itself. Seventh, we have the either-or fallacy. This is also known as the false dilemma. It presents two options as the only possibilities when, in fact, there are other alternatives. For example, you either support this policy or you're against progress. Recognize and present multiple alternatives in a situation to avoid this. Avoid simplifying complex issues into black and white choices. Eighth, we have the ad hominem fallacy. An ad hominem fallacy attacks the person making the argument rather than the argument itself. For example, you can't trust John's opinion on climate change because he's not a scientist. To avoid this, focus on the argument and the evidence presented. Avoid personal attacks and evaluate the merit of the argument itself. Ninth, we have ad populum. The ad populum fallacy appeals to the popularity of a claim as a reason for accepting it. For example, everyone believes that this brand is the best, so it must be true. To avoid this, rely on evidence and reasoning rather than popular opinion. Popularity does not determine truth. 10th, we have the red herring. Red herring is a distraction that leads people away from the key issue. For example, we shouldn't worry about the environment when there are so many people unemployed. How often do you hear something like this in politics? To avoid this, stay focused on the main issue at hand. Address distractions and bring the discussion back to the core argument. 11th is the straw man fallacy. The straw man fallacy involves misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. Again, you often see this in politics. For example, people who support space exploration want to waste money on useless rocks. To avoid this, engage with the strongest version of the opponent's argument. Avoid exaggerating or distorting the claims. Don't lose credibility. 12th, we have moral equivalency. This fallacy compares minor misdeeds with major atrocities, suggesting that both are equally bad. For example, parking in a handicapped spot is just as bad as committing fraud. To avoid this, ensure that comparisons are fair and proportionate. Avoid equating actions that are significantly different in scale and impact. Don't let your opinion get in the way of the facts. Base your arguments on solid evidence. Verify the sources of your information and ensure that they're credible. Be open-minded. Be willing to reconsider your views when presented with new evidence. Avoid becoming entrenched in your beliefs. This is incredibly difficult, but ultimately incredibly rewarding. Try to familiarize yourself with common logical fallacies. There are hundreds of others in addition to what I've already mentioned. Being aware of them will help you to recognize